Is travel in New Zealand expensive? Is it cheap? How much does transport cost? Are the activities expensive? How much does accommodation cost? And what's the average price of a meal? Well, we hope to be providing you with all these answers and more in the upcoming video. But first, a word from our sponsors.
Do you suffer from dry fingers? Dry mouth? Are you tired of being dead? Introducing all new water. This brand new, highly scientifically engineered product could save your life. It's easy to store and highly accessible. Comes out of a tap, from the sky, in a toilet. 6 out of 13 doctors agree that water is good for you. But don't just take our word for it. Ask our target research focus group.
It tastes like battery acid.
No thanks. I'm a vinegar man. Who the f*** are you?
So don't delay. Buy water today. Water. Just drink it.
Welcome back to another episode of Matt and Nat Travel That. We're a couple of travel vloggers on YouTube like everyone else these days, except we're not fake and we're okay to like. The big question, is travel in New Zealand expensive? Well, it depends on several factors and what kind of traveller you are. Are you a budget-friendly traveller? Or do you splurge out on a bit of luxury? Or maybe you're a bit of both.
Fact. New Zealand was ranked 104th in the world for tourism affordability behind notoriously expensive Japan.
While New Zealand is notoriously expensive to travel, it's still not up there with the likes of United Arab Emirates, Singapore, or even Switzerland. So in short, not as cheap as Thailand, but not as expensive as Europe. Number 2, cities. Expensive or cheap starting points. Depending on which city you start your journey in could dramatically affect your wallet before you even start your journey here in New Zealand. Most of you flying from the Northern Hemisphere will be landing in Auckland International Airport. There are 4 other international airports, but it doesn't really make sense if you're traveling 12 to 14 hours to go to any of the others. Auckland International is located in Auckland City, near the top part of the North Island. It is the most populated city, but it is also one of the most expensive. Queenstown has also been fighting for that top spot for a while now. Don't worry, Queenstown, we're going to get to you. Auckland may be expensive, but it also boasts a lot of options for accommodation, from hotels, Airbnbs, and backpackers galore. Now, in my research, I found that flying into other international airports in New Zealand didn't actually cut down any of the flight fares, at least by much. Auckland International was the cheapest one to fly into, but not by much. For example, flying London to Auckland was 1,938 New Zealand dollars, while flying London to Christchurch International was 1,995 New Zealand dollars.
Number 3. Transport. Is it expensive or cheap in New Zealand? If you're a broke backpacker looking to pinch a few pennies, then hitchhiking is a great option for you, although not the most practical. Hitchhiking is not illegal in New Zealand. It is, however, frowned upon and considered very dangerous. So if you are going to be doing hitchhiking, best of luck to you, but don't get your hopes up. Right, just to prove a point, I'm going to show you guys what New Zealanders think about hitchhiking. I'm going to ask Natalie. Nat, have you ever picked up a hitchhiker before?
Only one. He was a friend. Doesn't count. It's just like driving a friend somewhere.
What do you think about hitchhikers?
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Great book and movie. Hitchhiking in general? Don't do it. New Zealand is a small country, but it's not completely safe. There are bad buggers out there. So take a plane, a train, or even an automobile.
Which leads us to our next point. Next cheapest ways to get around are intercity shuttles and buses. There are some great deals and prices for this option, with intercity shuttles being our top pick, with fares as low as 26 New Zealand dollars per person. If you don't like the idea of sharing a close space with other human beings, then a car rental is the next best thing. Car rentals in New Zealand cost around 31 New Zealand dollars per day, which is around 215 New Zealand dollars per week. Hey, get off the road, you mongrel! Domestic flights in New Zealand are another great option if you need to get somewhere quick and you don't feel confident driving on the notoriously windy roads of New Zealand. We generally found that Air New Zealand was the most expensive domestic flights, with Jetstar having the cheapest domestic flights. There are other domestic flight companies in New Zealand, so it's best to do your research on this. If you are confident out on the roads and you hold an international driver's license, then why not see our beautiful country at your own leisure? Hiring a van or a camper van is the most popular way to travel New Zealand. Wickedcampers.co.nz had some outrageously cool looking vans with prices about $2.50 New Zealand per day. Now I couldn't believe those prices, so we had to go and search that up. Turns out they were having a 50% off deal, and we think it has something to do with a little thing called the pandemic. A more accurate price would vary on the size of the van and your insurance coverage. The cost of a 14-day van from Juicy Campers, yeah, Juicy, that's the name of the company, it's not a juicy looking van. The cost of hire is around 800 New Zealand dollars in the off-peak season. For camper vans, this is going to vary depending on your size of berth and the camper van style that you want to take. For example, a 2-berth camper van in the peak season is 175 New Zealand dollars per day, while in the off-season, it is 25 New Zealand dollars per day. A 4-berth camper van in peak season is 250 New Zealand dollars per day, while in the off-season, it is as low as 45 New Zealand dollars per day. Now, we recently did a 2-week tour of the South Island for our honeymoon in a 6-berth Maui camper van, and that cost us 1,585 New Zealand dollars, but that included full liability insurance, which we highly recommend you get because anything can happen out on those roads. Just driving down the road and we had a little bit of an accident. Stuff has fallen out of the fridge. We don't know how. It was all self-contained. It had running water, power, gas, fridge, toilet, shower. So we could legally freedom camp to cut down our accommodation costs. We highly recommend this option. It is very popular and it's very easy to see why. We have an awesome series of videos on our camper van adventures, which I will link up here so you can see more of what we did and what we got up to. I highly recommend you go and check that out. Hiring a self-contained camper van is easily the best way to go and see the country. We highly recommend it and we can't wait to go and do that all again. Which leads us to our next point. How much does accommodation cost? How much does accommodation cost? If you are going with a self-contained van or camper van option, this is going to greatly decrease your accommodation costs. You can freedom camp anywhere, but you will need to stay at a powered site from time to time. Powered sites are really affordable. 60 New Zealand dollars being around the most expensive. On average, we paid around $50 New Zealand per night, with the cheapest being around $40 New Zealand per night. We tended to stay at the top 10 holiday parks. We highly recommend that you go and stay there when you travel to New Zealand. They come with a load of facilities, toilets, showers, kitchen, powered site, a dump station, and everything that you could want. If you want to see more of that, we can make another video on the whole camper van experience. Just comment below and tell us what you want to see. Easy as that. If you don't have the luxury of a self-contained vehicle to stay in, then a homeless shelter is always a good option, and then there's the ever popular sleeping under a bridge. I kid. Alright, let's get into it. Hotels, B&Bs, and backpackers. What do we know? The average price of accommodation in New Zealand is around 92 New Zealand dollars per night. And for double occupancy, it's around 196 New Zealand dollars per night. And this is all dependent on how many of those little stars are attached to that hotel. Now, if you want to splurge it up like Richard T. Moneypants, then be prepared to let those bats fly out of your wallet. A 5-star hotel in New Zealand could set you back 1,821 New Zealand dollars per night per person. Now, if wearing a top hat and a monocle just isn't your scene, then perhaps a better suited option would be the ever popular Airbnb. Hi there, booking for Matt and Nat Travel That?
Oh no, sorry, we don't accept your kind here. Please leave.
But we're travel vloggers!
Yeah, please leave.
With hundreds of unique accommodations to choose from that can sit well under 99 New Zealand dollars per night, what a better option to go for. Nat and I had the pleasure of staying in a very unique wine barrel cabin experience last year. I will link that video up here for you guys to go and check it out. Next up is the accommodation that is perfectly suited for the 3-month beard sporting, hemp shirt wearing, hairy legged free spirit on the greatest adventure of finding yourself. I am in fact referring to the backpacker. Backpackers are a great way to cut down accommodation costs, although the downside is you may have to share a room with 15 other people, and there is always the potential danger of leaving your gear unattended in a room full of strangers that you don't know. That being said, backpackers are a great bunch of people, and you do have the potential of forming long-lasting friendships with people from all over the world. Number 5, subscribing to this channel is free, doesn't cost you a cent. So why not change your life and subscribe to Matt and Nat Travel That today. Shameless plug. Numero 6. Food and meals. How much do they cost in New Zealand? Well, the average price of a breakfast ranges from about $12 to $20 New Zealand per person, and a dinner will set you back around $30 New Zealand or $50 New Zealand per person, depending on which restaurant and how many of those Michelin stars you care about. Fun fact, tipping is not required in New Zealand. If you're looking to save a bit of coin, then the self-contained option is really good for you. Preparing your own meals and buying your own groceries and not having to spend that amount. During the 2 weeks that we were in our camper van tour, I think we spent around $70 per week on food, and that's not including the restaurants that we went to. Number 7, activities. How much do they cost? The biggest draw card for New Zealand is outdoors or the outdoor-based activities, and New Zealand has quite an abundance of them, whether it be kayaking, hiking, mountain climbing, or just generally standing in the rain, all of which are mostly cost-friendly and require no visits to the bank to beg for a loan. The other type of traveller that New Zealand caters to is the extreme activist. Extreme activities enthusiast, otherwise known as the thrill seeker. And boy, do we have a lot of them. From bungee jumping, whitewater rafting, cage diving with great white sharks, skydiving, and so much more. Now these activities are going to cost you a pretty penny, and they're mostly always based in Queenstown. Now our cage diving experience was around $1,000 New Zealand. I will link that video up there if you want to go and check it out. It's a pretty sweet video, but it was a once in a lifetime experience. Skydiving on the other hand can cost anywhere from 299 New Zealand dollars per person right up to 499 New Zealand dollars per person. Bungee jumping in Queenstown costs around 208 New Zealand dollars per adult, and for a child it's 155 New Zealand dollars per person. Child? Are they really chucking children off bridges now? Whitewater rafting in Queenstown costs around 199 New Zealand dollars per person, and jet boating costs us around 129 New Zealand dollars per person. Also, I will link that video up there. I know I'm doing these shameless plugs, but yeah, whatever. Number 8, the overall price. Now, while we did so many amazing activities during our 2-week tour of the South Island, we had an amazing time. We would not regret it. The overall price of our camper van trip was around 5,000 New Zealand dollars for 14 days. Now, your prices may differ. This was our honeymoon after all, and we were not about to skimp on it anything. We wanted to remember it for a lifetime. So just keep that in mind. Now, we hope we've answered all of your questions around the cost of traveling around in New Zealand. Did you find it expensive? How does it compare to your countries? Would you like us to make another video? Please comment down below. We'd love to hear from you. Now, if you thought this video was tight, leave us a like. This ain't no bribe. Please subscribe. And hey, what the hell? Ding that bell. And we'll see you again in the next one. Bye.